DFS Fridays. We are going to get you guys ready for this week 6 slate on Draftkings. You know the drill. First up, we got JMToWin from 1 week season. We're going to go position by position, get his favorite plays, an overview of the slate, and then we'll finish by building a lineup on Draftkings. After that, we'll have Youdacao from Run the Sims swinging by to break down input volatility, his favorite contrarian stacks, and then we'll go through the Sims and pick out some lineups that align with his ball-knowing takes. I'm Pete Overzet. This is Block Party and Bully the Sims. Let's roll.
Peter's one of the greatest depositors I've ever seen.
Trust the process. Let's go.
I got auto match with Levitan. Bullshit.
I just go the other way. In that 66, I win all the money. All the money.
If I had 150 lineups, I'd win too.
AP, 35 bullets in your head like KD. Bust it, bitch, go bust it. And I had 10 pints with me in Russia.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, everyone. Indeed. JMToWin. Good to see you. How did week 5 go for you, my man?
Man, week 5. So it was a down week in terms of ROI. I did hit plus 7 units in betting, which I never bet, but I had such a good feel for the slate that I was like, yeah, let's throw some money down. And yeah, it was one of my favorite weeks because it was like my rosters didn't come together, but it was one of the best weeks I've ever had in terms of just having a great feel for how the slate was going to shape up. So that was fun. So yeah, we take a big picture view. Like I said last week, right? I don't even know what week we're in. We're in week 6. Week 4, I had a big hit. Week 3, I had a roster that could have had a big hit. And those 2 weeks were basically the same, right? That's kind of how I look at things is was I on track to have a win? Week 3, it didn't happen. Week 4, it did happen, but it was basically the same setup, right? Where it was I had a roster that was in play, that was live, that had the outs. It was probably a favorite to win. And so, yeah, taking that big picture view, I was really, really excited about last week just because it felt like I was really on point. Of course, that's 1 week. This week, I'm more up in the air with how I'm seeing things. So I don't know if that necessarily carries over, but yeah, last week was good. We still got time on this week. And yeah, let's do some fact finding today and see where we're at.
Yeah, I'm very excited to talk this one through with you. I mean, kind of our similar dynamics in that we got some buys, we got some low totals, we got some injury situations to sift through. One I just saw as we went live here was Jamar Chase is now questionable. Missed today with an illness. Chris Godwin officially ruled out. So we got some moving pieces here. I'll keep my eye on things and flag anything notable as it comes across the wire. I do have to ask, how have the flights been going, to go reg for your DK stuff? Are you getting through some good reading material, racking up the frequent flyer miles? How's that going?
Yeah. So for any of you who don't know, Oregon took away Draftkings 3 years ago because of their partnership with Draftkings for Sportsbook. So I now have to fly to California. I fly to Oakland every Tuesday to reserve my entries. So yeah, this year, since I'm watching all the games, I download a couple games, watch those on the plane, watch the condensed versions of a couple games at the airport. It's actually, so, my kids are 4 and 6. They're homeschooled. So they're home all day. Goldie's got dance 2 days a week. William, we're taking them to the track on Wednesdays. We got soccer practice Thursdays. We got soccer games on Saturdays. We got family stuff. So it's I'm so busy between work and family that Tuesdays have become my restorative days, where it used to be it's kind of draining to fly every week. And now it's hey, I'm just alone all day watching football games. So yeah, it's been good. Actually, early November, each kid is going with me one day. So
nice.
My daughter gets the first week, my son gets the second week. So they're excited about that. But yeah, for now, we'll get the restoration on those days and watch take your kid to work day.
I was just going to say that has to be the most bizarre take your kid to work day. We're going to fly across the state border to register DFS teams. And then you get there and they're like, well, now what?
Yeah. We got a longer layover those days. So we'll go into Oakland or San Francisco, have a little bit of fun. And but yeah, so for now, I'll enjoy the restoration on these days.
That's hilarious. All right, let's dive into a little bit of a DFS slate overview. We do have another one of these European games on Sunday, Broncos and Jets. Got some games with truly gross totals, Browns Steelers, which for the best ball bros, that's a week 17 preview there. I think we called it the Turd Bowl when we initially saw the matchups there. Seahawks, Jags, 47.5, Cardinals, Colts, 47. Does sound like Kyler is going to go. Cowboys, Panthers, 49.5 is pretty intriguing. Patriots, Saints, kind of surprising there at 46. And then Bucks and Niners at 47.5, kind of trying to flag some of the higher totals there. But what stands out to you on this one?
Well, yeah, what stood out to me, and this is 3-4 weeks in a row. What stood out to me first was the Cowboys game. It's not always going to play out in our favor. we talked about this last week, right? I went on and on about like Justin Fields was my second highest exposure quarterback, and was pretty close to being highest exposure. I ended up going Goff as my highest exposure. We talked about that stack last week, and just like the expected value on that, how much money you're going to make on that one over time. And but yeah, it was the whole talk last week was like Fields is the best play. Fields has so many paths to failure that are kind of hidden because of the way that the Jets play. And like this fear that the Cowboys are going to be conservative, just sort of slowly pull away. The Jets were not going to throw the ball. And we saw that happen, right? Heading into the fourth quarter, it was like, oh, Fields rosters are dead, or at least heading into late third quarter. And then the Jets turn it on and they pick up a bunch of points, and Fields ends up being one of the better ways to play that slate. This week, it's like the same thing, except Bryce Young is even less comfortable and less confident than Justin Fields, where it's like, 4 of his last 11 games, I think it's still 4 of his last 11. He's got 23.9 or more DraftKings points, 23.6 or more. Like he's got a 26 pointer in there, a 30 something pointer, like it's like a 36 pointer in there. Like Bryce Young can do this, but also those were late last year. We're talking about, hey, over his last 11, 12 games, that was late last year, right? And teams develop throughout the season. They get a better sense of who they are. I do think Jalen Coker, expected to come back this week, makes a difference in his ability, because one of the things that Bryce Young's not great at is those downfield throws. And so when Tedero and McMillan is his main target, but it's a lot of these outside the numbers downfield throws, it's hard for them to piece together drives. And so bringing in Jalen Coker kind of elevates that opportunity for them to put together drives. And, Pete, what I've been looking for while watching all these games, and why I felt so confident last week with just straight betting, which I know over time we don't have an edge on the books, but it was just a week where it was like, oh, I really have a feel for the slate. What I'm looking for at this point in the season is teams driving the field and how good they are at putting together drives, keeping the defense off balance, and not shooting themselves in the foot. Because ultimately, the NFL game is a game of picking up first downs, right? Everybody's hunting for chunk plays, but those are ultimately going to be rare unless you're the Broncos and you're trying it every 3 or 4 plays. But generally speaking, chunk plays are going to be rare. And so we're looking for teams that can consistently keep the defense off balance, drive the field with intermediate throws, staying ahead of the chains and not making mistakes, not shooting themselves in the foot. So the thing with the Jets last week, same thing with the Panthers this week. It's like the problem with the Panthers isn't the opponent, the opposing defense stopping them. A lot of times it's them stopping themselves, right? It's bad throws, it's dumb decisions, it's fumbles, it's interceptions. So the question is going to be, can the Panthers put a full game together? If they can, this is the game to beat. And then if this isn't the game to beat, what is the game to beat? So that's kind of how I'm looking at this slate.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. It's funny too. I always talk about kind of sentiment indicators, that I get on Underdog, and people are aggressively drafting Tedero. He's a top 15 pick. Like everyone's very comfortable with him, and obviously Rico too, without Chuba. But no one wants anything to do with Bryce. Obviously, there's kind of some murkiness there with the tight ends and Coker coming back. But most people only want to touch the Panthers through Chuba and Tedero. So that is an interesting note there. What any other games, if you were to identify one that you think could challenge that spot? I mean, just looking at totals, that Tampa Bay, San Francisco one is there, Seattle, Jacksonville, maybe Indianapolis on its own, kind of pulling Arizona along. Anything else stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. Tampa, San Francisco is really the game that's, you've got 2 offenses that are so good and they stay on schedule so consistently. And the Buccaneers defense has a lot of holes. The 49ers aren't getting a lot of pressure on the quarterback. And so you have well-coached defenses, but they're not scary defenses. And both these offenses can move the ball in these spots. And so, we also got to keep in mind, a lot of times it's how these games develop throughout the game. The Commanders were down 10-0 deep into the first half against the Chargers, then outscored them 27-0 the rest of the way, right? It took 3 or 4, maybe 5 drives for them to get a feel for what the Chargers were throwing at them. Same thing with the Seahawks. They were down 13-0 until Sam Darnold went on a drive at the end of the half to make it 13-7. And all of a sudden you look up at the end of that game and it was whatever it was, 38-35. And so we could have something like that here where this game starts slowly, but as it gets going, it starts to really get going, right? And so we looked through the game logs last year. I had this in my journal this week, but like Baker Mayfield is so consistently scoring 30+ points. And I think it was 8 games last year they scored 30+, a bunch of games over 40. And then, 4 games where they gave up 30+. And so this is one of those games where the rhythm of it could start speeding up deeper into the game, and we could have this back and forth, similar to what we had in the Bucs game last week. Obviously, the Seahawks and the Jags. My big concern with the Jags is, so people come away from that game praising Trevor Lawrence, right? The game against the Chiefs. If they don't score at the end, all the talk is about how Trevor Lawrence still isn't putting it all together, still isn't making the big plays, right? it's very outcome dependent in the way that people are seeing this. Like, they were not staying on schedule against the Chiefs. I know the Chiefs have a good defense. So do the Seahawks, right? The Jags were not staying on schedule against the Chiefs. They were consistently in long down and distances, consistently behind the chains, and then they would find a big play. But that's not a reliable way to score points. So I think this game has a broad range of outcomes where the Seahawks have had, they were the number 3 scoring defense, something like that in the NFL before last week's game against a tremendous Buccaneers offense. So I think this game has a broad range of outcomes where it could end up high scoring. I think it also could play to the downside. One other one I want to throw out here. Is there a chance Cooper Rush can keep this game competitive against the Rams, right? Like, the Cooper Rush, the whole thing with him was like, hey, he's 9-5 as a starter. He was able to produce as the Cowboys quarterback. Last week was weird. They were also playing a Texans defense that's so good, right? The reason the Rams defense is good is because they disrupt drives. So it's like every once in a while that pass rush gets there, or they throw something at the opponent that just messes them up. Whereas the Texans are a good defense because they're good on a play-to-play basis, which is a little bit different from what the Rams throw. So I do think that there's a chance that this game is competitive enough that the Rams are having to push throughout. And then you end up with like a 34-24 type of game, as opposed to sort of the blowout that I think a lot of people are probably expecting here.
All right, let's transition over to quarterback, and obviously we'll hit on a few of more of these situations as we kind of get specifically in play here. Doesn't sound like Lamar Jackson is going to play, which means we really have none of those elite quarterbacks on the high end with kind of those big rushing ceilings. Obviously no Allen, no Mahomes here. So it does really leave kind of this Baker, Dak, obviously Stafford in this spot against the banged up Ravens, Herbert, and Love, I guess I'll include in there as part of this top tier in the 6K range. If you're paying up at quarterback, which one of these guys do you like the most?
Yeah, if I'm paying up, probably Dak, because I'd be betting on that game environment playing out a certain way. I think people are misreading the Panthers defense. Like, they're not bad anymore, and they're not a bad run defense anymore. They're not good, but they're not bad. But I don't think that matters for the way that the Cowboys have been playing on offense. One of the top offenses and most consistent, most on-schedule offenses in the league. And so if I'm paying up, it's not so much that I'm betting on Dak, it's that I'm betting on that being the top game environment. So it's like, what do I want to set aside first? So what I'm looking at right now, and it's Friday, right? Last week, we didn't even have the Rico Dowdle news yet when you and I recorded this podcast. So things can change. But right now, what I'm probably looking at is like half of my rosters in single entry 3-max being Dak and Bryce Young rosters, and then the other half being like a mix and match of 4 or 5 different quarterbacks. And so it's not so much that I isolate Dak and say, oh, he's one of the top plays. It's just that it's a way to bet on this game environment and the high likelihood of there being something here with how good the Cowboys offense is and how bad the Cowboys defense has been. If I'm going outside of that game environment, the next game environment I like the most is this 49ers Bucks. And so it would be Baker, but again, 49ers Bucks. So it's not so much for me saying I love Baker in this spot. It's more like I like this game, and there's nothing that really stands out to me. If you're trying to isolate one-offs, I guess Herbert is really the one. I'm not impressed with this offense right now. And then the only thing Miami has going for them on defense is a great pass rush. And this Chargers offensive line is so broken right now with all these injuries. And so I do think that it's going to be tough, especially with Miami probably not doing great against this Chargers defense. It's going to be tough for the scoring to really take off. But I do think that there's pathways to it. And so Herbert's kind of on my list and in the mix for me as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the Herbert one was interesting too. And I know he's been like a favorite of the field, like going to him each and every week. But that offensive line banged up. This game has kind of a surprising low total too, kind of considering the offenses. Yeah.
And I mean, it's a function of the Chargers really don't do anything to keep a defense off balance. So it's more like, hey, our guys are going to go beat your guys. The good thing for them is in this situation, their guys are much better than the Dolphins guys. But with that offensive line, that just throws things off schedule a little bit. And the Chargers are at their best when they can run the ball. You can run against Miami, but can the Chargers do it with their offensive line and with 2 backup running backs? And so, I mean, I just think there's a lot of opportunities to the downside here. Realistically, will it surprise us if like some big plays get hit and all of a sudden scoring's higher? No, it shouldn't surprise us. So I think we have to account for that game in our thinking and probably in our rosters as well, depending on our approach. But the likeliest scenarios to the downside in that game.
Let's see here. I think where the field is going to kind of gravitate is probably not paying up at quarterback this week. You have the two kind of rushing guys in Drake May and Daniel Jones, who look like pretty good values. And then we did mention Trevor Lawrence there as well. What stands out among that cohort?
Yeah, I would push back on Daniel Jones being a rushing guy because, he's got, I think, 27 yards on the year, something like that, or one game with 26 yards. He's at the 3 rushing scores, but those are all from the 1 yard line. And now that was the first 2 weeks, right? They're using Jonathan Taylor there more now. My concern with the Colts, I read this in Lord Reeb's worksheet over at Sharp Football Analysis, one of the greatest articles in the fantasy space. But he pointed out that Daniel Jones is first in the NFL in first half fantasy points and like near the bottom of the NFL in second half fantasy points. So yeah, the question is really like, can the Cardinals keep pace and push the Colts to continue in this game? So I'm fine with Daniel Jones. He's definitely on my list in the mix for me. On the Drake May side, yeah, I mean, like realistically, I think his over under for pass attempts this week is 30.5, which is a reasonable range for us to expect him to land. So that's the big thing is like, does he get enough pass attempts to be a tournament winner? I have a hard time seeing it, but then also like maybe there are no tournament winners at quarterback. And so if Drake May gets you the 21 to 24 that he can easily get, he ends up being the guy. The toughest thing with Drake May is who do you stack him with? I know that the obvious answer is, Stephon Diggs, right? But like Diggs played 30 snaps last week. Diggs was also playing against his old team. He got 12 targets because of the nature of that game. And the week before, May only threw it 17 times, right? But Diggs had, I think it was 7 targets in that game. So he put up over 100 yards. It was on limited volume. And this is a team that likes to spread the ball around. And so, I do think that there's opportunity for this to be an old school Josh McDaniels Patriot type of game where the quarterback puts up a good score, but there's really nobody to pair him with, right? Because you're mixing and matching running backs, mixing and matching pass catchers. But I think both these guys are in the mix. Neither guy really stands out to me. I've got both of them kind of penciled into this 10% exposure range in my player pool, and that could change. But it's like I'm going to pick like probably 5 guys I have 10% exposure to in single entry 3 max, and these are 2 of those guys who are in the mix for me.
Yeah, it is interesting how quickly the Diggs enthusiasm kind of snapped back after that game. And I've been kind of skeptical too. Again, he's very popular on Underdog this week. And it's like the revenge game where we got the clips of Vrabel giving him the game ball after the game. I'm like, I don't know if we're going to get this every single week here for Stefon Diggs. So I'm kind of with you, but May obviously has that kind of massive ceiling that is attractive to people. I guess one I got to keep mentioning just because he, balled out last week. I mean, can we do anything with Sam Darnold here? Just playing out of his mind right now. Yeah.
The problem with Darnold is just how much volume is there going to be? I mean, you look at how unique that game was last week. This was I talked about this in my journal this week. Like the last week might've been the best feel I've ever had for a slate. And the one thing I missed was this Seattle Tampa game. And I kept being like, Darnold as like, trying to figure out, okay, if Fields doesn't hit, who wins a tournament? It was like Darnold. And it was like, nah, not Darnold. And I move off and I come back and be like, Darnold, no, not Darnold. And the thing is, it's these other games, right, where you're looking at 26, 18, 33, 23 pass attempts. It's hard to get to the ceiling there, but this is the same offense that you remember last year, Derek Carr, first 2 weeks of the season, it was like, oh, Derek Carr, this Saints offense, it's the way to go, right? And then all these injuries piled up. People think that people figured out the Kubiak offense. That's not what it was, right? The Saints just got so beaten, battered, offensive line, skill position players. They had nobody to throw to. So I think that this offense is for real. It's this Kubiak roots. It's this Shanahan-style system, and it's being run to perfection. So I do think that Seattle's ceiling on a game-to-game basis is there. It's just a question of volume, and he's not going to run. So does he get the passing yards and then the touchdowns enough to make him turning viable? So he's sort of a satellite play to me on the other quarterback in this game. Trevor, like if I have enough Trevor Lawrence, I'll throw in some Sam Darnold. But I do think that there are unique ways to sort of think about this game and play it. Darnold's not at the top of the list for me, but he's viable. He's in the mix.
Yep. We got a question from Andrew in the chat. He was wondering if you had any love for Cam Ward, referencing kind of putting it together there in the 4th, connecting with Calvin Ridley on some of those deep shots.
Yeah, so Cam Ward had, so one of the things I was thinking while watching that particular game was I kept thinking like, these players are making no NFL plays. And like, to me, NFL plays are, if you watch the game last night, Jalen Hyatt, that ball in the back of the end zone, that he doesn't come down with. Obviously, they call the pass interference. But like I said to my 6-year-old who didn't care, but I was like, an NFL player makes that catch. You know, like those are the types of plays that you expect these guys to make. And the Titans are just constantly like soft drops, mistakes, stuff like that, right? And then all of a sudden in the fourth quarter, that throw to Calvin Ridley was like one of the best throws of the season. That throw to Gunnar Helm and the catch by Gunnar Helm. And it was like back-to-back plays. And you're like, whoa, where did this come from? You know, it was like 2 elite NFL plays. So I think Cam Ward has that in him. And what's also interesting is like Brian Callahan is holding this offense back so much, right? Because they're so conservative and they're so willing to run the ball on 3rd and longs. And, you know, they're not a team that scares you where you, growing up a Patriots fan, like you watch this game against Josh Allen, every time he gets the ball and you get him to 3rd and 12, you're still like, yeah, but he's probably going to convert this, right? Whereas the Titans, you get them to 3rd and 12 and they're like, oh, okay, all right, we'll concede. We're going to run it here. But what they are doing is they're big play hunting. So Cam Ward is chucking the ball downfield, not quite like Bo Nix and the Broncos, but they're throwing the ball downfield a lot, which is awesome to see. And you can have big plays against the Raiders. So for me, single entry 3 max, which is what I've been focused on lately, I want to see more consistency before I believe in it. I don't believe in it yet, but I think you can take swings in large field play and MME. I think that the risk is too great to justify the potential reward in single entry 3 max to where it's like over time you lose money taking this swing. Even if in the small sample size of this week it pops, like I just think over time you're losing money trying to play the guessing game there. But I do think in large field play it's viable because I mean we've been saying it since week 1, right? Like Cam Ward looks the part and he's willing to take shots downfield. And now this offense is kind of letting him take shots downfield. So I think it's viable. I'm not going there myself though in single entry 3 max.
I know I included this guy in the higher end price tier, but just because it's the other kind of game and total that really stands out. Any thoughts on Stafford? Everyone obviously very excited to attack this Ravens defense. Yeah.
So I think if I play Stafford, I want to play it with Zay Jones or Isaiah Likely or something, right? Like I want to say this game stays competitive because I know that Stroud did it last week in a non-competitive game. I don't know exactly what his fantasy score was, but it was up there, you know?
Yeah, it was
good. And it was in a non-competitive game. And that can happen, but it's just unlikely. You know, you typically don't get the what we were chasing with Jared Goff last week, right? Like all the passing touchdowns without the support of the game environment. So we look at these games where Stafford's hit, and it was this, you know, obviously they lost this game to the 49ers. They barely won this game against the Colts. They had to have a comeback to win this game against the Colts. And so we're looking at games like that where it's like you are in a battle and you're going back and forth and they're asking Stafford to do a lot. And that's typically where you're going to see the Stafford games. He's a pocket passer, so you need the yards and the touchdowns. So I don't want to play Stafford and bet on a blowout win. Obviously, it's possible it plays out that way, but it's a low percentage bet. I want to play Stafford and bet on the Ravens keeping it close, which is not only a higher percentage way for Stafford to hit, but also will be lower owned by the field, I would imagine, because people don't want to go to this Ravens offense. And it's just one sample size, one game we've seen of Cooper Rush. We've seen another 14 games where he's capable of supporting a number 1 receiver in CeeDee Lamb. He's capable of keeping a team competitive and offense on schedule. And so I do think it's very much within the range of outcomes that the Ravens, who are still the betting favorites for their division at 1-4, with them being 7.5-point underdogs this week, right? So it's like the betting public says they're going to lose this week. They're going to be 1-5, and we're still betting on them to win the division. Like this is still a good team, generally speaking, a good offense. And so if Cooper Rush can keep them on schedule, then yeah, we have this situation where Stafford really can pop in this game.
All right. Shout out to everybody hanging out in the chat. I need to wear a collared shirt more often because I have not gotten this amount of engagement on,
there we go.
On what I'm wearing.
You got engagement from me right before we came on here. So you look
it's so funny.
It's all about game.
I know it's all about juxtaposition, right? Because if you just wear tank tops most of the time and then you have a collared on, it looks like a tuxedo to the audience there. So thank you guys all for the compliments. I'm feeling nice and
if you were on Nantucket, you'd be dressed down right now. But for our audience, like you're looking sharp, you're dressed up, we're ready for. You should have told me. Like I've worn the suit on here before. I would have done it.
Exactly. I know that is one of the great recurring bits on this show. Used to be you and your different costume changes.
I did. I almost threw on the karting head sock today, and I was like, no, let's just go with the hat and play it straight.
How much would I pay for a collared tank? That would be a good bet. That would be a good bet. All right, let's head over to running back here this week. Got some of the really nice guys on the high end. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor, McCaffrey, Achane, Jacobs gets this this really bad Bengals team. Let's start there with those top four. Maybe you could include Genty if you want. I'll let you decide on that. But what do you think about those guys?
Yeah, this running back feels similar to the last 2 weeks where it's like the last 2 weeks I had a list of like 8 or 9 running backs. And it was like, do I need to sort through this list, make the list tighter? And it was like, no, these are all really good plays. And in most of those instances, it turned out you could kind of throw a dart at that group and you were getting like 22 to 30 points, you know? And it kind of feels similar this week where we got a pretty big pool of viable running backs. And I'm not wasting a ton of time. Like, to me, quarterback and pass catchers are really muddled this week. Running back, it's like, oh yeah, there's a bunch of good plays. I'm not overthinking who I'm on, right? So like last week we had Rico Dowdle open up and it was like, well, he's 4,300. And I kind of walked through that in my journal of like all the reasons why I loved Rico Dowdle last week. And I was like, okay, he's going on 50% of my builds. And then we'll figure out, like, we'll mix and match the other guys from there. We don't have something quite like that this week. And so it's like, running back looks good. You know, like Christian McCaffrey, he's the wide receiver 6 in terms of just his receiving production. Now, they've been bad running the ball, but you're getting the wide receiver 6 for 8,400, and then you know he's going to get some carries. And you know there's an opportunity for him to break some of these. So yeah, like Christian McCaffrey, CMC and Puka are in this same bucket where it's like they're probably not a key decision point, as in they're probably not putting up the 35 to 40 point score. The same was the case when Puka did put up the 39 pointer, right? Like that's just unlikely in this spot because it's unlikely that the Ravens push this game enough that Puka has to do it. It's unlikely that Christian McCaffrey against this Tampa run defense does enough where it's like, oh, I had to have him. But also they're highly likely to score 20 plus, probably 23, 24, 25 plus. So it's like anytime they fit on a roster, they're a very sharp play. Anytime they don't, you don't have to force them. That's how I'm looking at them. Jonathan Taylor, highest ceiling or tied for the highest ceiling? Yeah, probably the highest ceiling, but like a lower floor than you typically get at 8,500, you know? And so that's sort of the way I look at Jonathan Taylor is somebody like that. So what I've been doing is single entry 3 max, but putting like 20 rosters into play, kind of like a mini MME mindset. And then that way I can say, okay, I want 5% exposure to this player, or I want 10% exposure. And that's just like 5% bankroll exposure, 10% bankroll exposure. So Jonathan Taylor's the kind of guy who it's going to be like 10 to 20% or 15 to 25% for me, where it's like, if he has the big game, I want to be there. If he has the low end game, I actually probably be a little bit underweight the field because I want to make sure that I account for the fact that he can score like 12, 14 points in his role. Josh Jacobs, yeah, I think this is a smash spot for him. We have defenses that people think are bad, right? And then defenses that are genuinely bad. And the Bengals fall into that second category. And so, yeah, I think that Josh Jacobs, you know, he's going to get his 20 touches and not heavily involved in the passing attack, not the same as like taking a CMC. But if I'm going to bet on a guy who can score 2 or 3 touchdowns, I like that bet. And yeah, Genty is one of these guys who I've been on and off. And typically when I'm on and off of a guy, it's because I just can't feel comfortable with them. And that tends to actually like that guy ends up having a big game, right? Because like, I just can't get comfortable. Like Genty's big week, I had him as high as like a light blue chip in my player grid at one point in that week. I ended up moving him down to tier 2 bonus play. And then I think I might have taken him off the player grid altogether. Because it was like, well, he's tier 2 bonus. I'm not playing him. You know, it's kind of how I feel with him this week. And so I'm trying to recognize that pattern and just realize it's a great, I mean, this offense is so bad. They're so bad at staying on track. And it's like they can run the ball poorly or hit the occasional big play. But then what do you do if it's, you know, you hit a 20-yarder and now you're at the 50-yard line and then you go 3 and out from there, right? So it's like this offense shoots itself in the foot, and the fact they're in a good matchup doesn't necessarily help them all that much. But I do think this is a week where they could emphasize Genty and say, hey, like, we just got to stay on schedule against the Titans. We just have to run the ball. We just have to stay ahead of the chains. And I think that Genty can do, as long as Jeffrey Simmons doesn't blow up plays. And he did miss practice earlier in this week. Like if Jeffrey Simmons is out, that makes a huge difference. So I want to shout that out, to keep an eye on the Titans injury report, that this becomes like an extremely soft matchup if Jeffrey Simmons is out for the Titans defense. But yeah, I think Genty is very much in play, not quite in the Josh Jacobs category, but in that similar conversation in terms of like, he's going to get the touches and he could have the multi-touchdown game.
Let's head to the two players who kind of opened up his value last week. Both paid off their value. I mean, Rico, one of the most insane games you will see, going for over 200 rushing yards there. And then Rachaad White, no Bucky Irving again, no Chris Godwin as well. I mean, it's going to be the Puka and Rachaad White show there. So thoughts on those guys? Obviously, their prices are up, but still not a ton here, Rico and Rachaad White.
Yeah, so I prefer Rico over Rachaad White because Rachaad White, you're going to get 30 or 40 rushing yards most of the time, and so you're really banking on the receiving work and then the touchdowns. His 2 years ago when he was in this featured role, I think he went over like 23 DraftKings points once, something like that. It was like a 27-pointer, and he was so popular that year because pricing gets tight deeper into the season, and he's always going to score like 16 to 21 points, and there's a lot of value in that. So I like Rachaad White, definitely. I have a harder time seeing him putting up like the 25 to 30 pointer. And I think this could be another week where we're seeing those. So I'm fine with Rachaad White. He's not at the top of my list. Rico Dowdle, what I like about Dowdle is I don't think he's inferior to Chuba Hubbard. And I think he might be a little bit better. And that was what I talked about last week was it wasn't like where I didn't know where to pay up last week. Right. But it was like, I'm not playing Michael Carter, who I'm like, hopefully he gets, and Michael Carter ended up having a good game too, but you're like, hopefully he gets the touches. Hopefully it shakes out the right way. Hopefully the points pile up. It was like you knew Rico Dowdle was going to have the role, and you knew he's capable of producing in this role. And, running backs have produced in this role for the Panthers, right? So it was like he's just a good raw play. And what I kept saying last week on kind of Friday and Saturday was like he has a shot to be one of the highest scoring running backs on the slate, and he's 4,300. So even though we don't need the savings, you just play him, right? This week, he has a shot at being one of the highest scoring running backs on the slate, and he's 5,800. And that's how I look at it is if he misses, he's probably scoring 14, 16 points, which isn't going to kill you. And he can hit for 20, 21, 22, 24, outside shot at like 28, 29. So, Rico Dowdle, like realistically, he's probably not putting the slate out of reach again, but he's probably going to be posting a solid score, and he has a shot at a high-end score. So, last week was, I don't want to say fluky, it was still a low percentage outcome. And so we shouldn't expect that this week, but we should expect the opportunities to be there, the floor to be high, and the opportunity for ceiling to be there.
I was going to ask thoughts on correlation with him and then potentially playing a bounce back for Bryce in the passing game, where it's like intuitively to me, you see how they win last week on the ground, 23 carries, all of that. And it's like all the production is there and you wouldn't want the Bryce stuff. But could you see scenarios where they score enough points and the price is so low that a block could work for like this entire, offense?
Yeah, I mean, that'll be one of my primary ways to play Bryce Young this week is probably not probably. In some rosters, not even Tedero and McMillan, not even Jalen Coker, just Bryce and Rico Dowdle and Javonte Williams. And that hit 3 times last year down the stretch. Now, the Panthers' run defense is better because Derrick Brown's back. There's, again, still not good, but they're much better than they were last year when it was like, oh, anybody can run on them. But 3 times down the stretch last year, it was Bryce Young plus Chuba Hubbard. Actually, 1 week it was Miles Sanders. Chuba Hubbard missed. Miles Sanders went for 25 plus DraftKings points. There was Bryce Young, Panthers running back, and opposing running back. And that was the stack that was like putting you on pace to win tournaments because Bryce Young doesn't typically throw for 250, let alone 300 yards, right? Typically, if he's having one of his bigger games, it's because he's adding 30, 40, 50 yards scrambling and maybe rushing in a touchdown. And all of a sudden, like all these points are piling up. It becomes a high scoring game. Bryce and the running back are accounting for the touchdowns. And you can definitely throw a pass catcher in there because it could be a 2-touchdown game concentrated on one guy. Bryce Young's done that plenty as well. We've seen it with Adam Thielen. We saw it earlier this year with Hunter Renfrow, where it's like, oh, I found a guy who I can throw to in the red zone. I'm going to do it again and again. So you can definitely throw a pass catcher in there. But I think that the most mathematically plus EV way to play it is probably Bryce Young plus Rico Dowdle plus Javonte Williams, because we know that offense on the Cowboys side is going to run through Javonte Williams. And I think it's a very sharp way to attack this one.
It's funny you mentioned that because I'm pretty sure I'm not remembering it maybe entirely correct, but the lineup that won the Millie Maker last week, I know had Justin Fields and Breece Hall with no Garrett Wilson. In the same thought, these guys are values and the prices are cheap enough that correlation can work without it. And then I think the lineup had Ferguson. I don't know if it had Javonte. It might have. But it's just funny that same block.
Yeah, and these guys aren't drawn dead for receiving work and receiving touchdowns either. The Breece Hall or the Rico Dowdle, like they can get there as well.
Let's see. One other spot here that I think we should discuss are kind of these low 6K running backs. Javonte Williams, who's playing out of his mind right now. And then also Kyren Williams, if people kind of gravitate to playing that team total through the passing game. Thoughts on those guys at 6,400 and 6,300?
Yeah, so I mean, I keep likening Javonte Williams for like 2 or 3 weeks now. I've been basically calling him like the new James Conner, where it's like what I was saying last week is like you're not going to be able to predict these 30-point games, but he's going to have 2 to 4 of these games this year where it's like 28 to 32 DraftKings points, and the rest of the year it's going to be like 16 to 24, and there's going to be the occasional dud of like 12 points or something like that. But with Javonte Williams, it's similar to James Conner in that he's not going to hit a lot of explosive plays at this point in his career, but he's going to consistently pick up yards, which means they're going to consistently give him the ball, and he's going to be involved on the ground, in the pass game, near the goal line. And so like the floor is so high on a Javonte Williams. And yeah, I mean, it's been 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks in a row that he's been one of my priorities at the running back position. And that's not going to change this week. Again, the matchup isn't as good as people think it is, but it's still a fine matchup. And he's just so consistently involved in this offense. And then Kyren Williams, so he's averaging 17.3 DraftKings points per game this year. He averaged 17.9 DraftKings points per game last year. To put that into context, Devon Achane averaged 18 DraftKings points per game last year, right? And everybody like jumps out of their socks to play Devon Achane close to 8K in salary. And then they kind of waffle back and forth on, should I play Kyren Williams in the low 6Ks, you know? So the game logs kind of shape out the same as Devon Achane, just the perception isn't the same. So when Kyren Williams has one of these like 11 or 13 point games, it's like, oh man, I paid 6,300 and got this score. But like he balances that with the 30 pointers. So I think against Baltimore, where we do expect the Rams to score points, 4 or 5 touchdowns in the spot would be pretty reasonable. Kyren Williams has a good shot at being part of that. One red flag, Blake Corum has been heavily involved this year. Last week, he fumbled on his first carry. It's funny, in our prop service, they took an over on Blake Corum 26.5 rushing yards. He had 1 carry, 13 yards, fumbles. And McVay's like, no, you're out of here, bro. Kyren Williams fumbled at the goal line later. And so it's like, I don't think that Corum is in the doghouse for good. So Kyren Williams doesn't quite have the same role that he had last year, but he still has enough of a role and enough of a red zone role that I like Kyren Williams this week against Baltimore as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like the similar thing with, the Kyren fumbles are, the Ramondre fumbles, where it's like, we have this plan in mind for how we want to use Ramondre, and he basically has the world's longest leash because they don't really have a viable replacement for the early downs. Yeah,
and I think there's a lot of like psychological balancing going on with the Patriots in terms of like Vrabel vocally being like, yeah, we're not moving away from Ramondre. Then Ramondre had that fumble, and Vrabel talked to him, and then like I've seen talk this week about, hey, and Ramondre's still the goal line back. My read on it was like they gave him carries close to the goal line where they knew that like the play call and the blocking scheme was going to give him a pretty open lane to the end zone, just to continue showing him like, hey, we have confidence in you, and like they're going to need him later in the year, right? So keep his confidence up. But yeah, I mean, like these fumbles become an issue and teams have to worry about them. It's a problem if both guys fumble, and it's like, okay, well, we just got to keep playing both guys. So that's what I think we see from the Rams here. And yeah, but I like Kyren Williams in the spot. And it's like this bucket of running backs. I think we've touched on them: Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Josh Jacobs, Ashton Genty, Javonte Williams, Kyren Williams, Rashad White, and Rico Dowdle. We skipped over one in Quinshon Judkins that I also like. The one concern being, how many points can Cleveland score? But Dylan Gabriel looked good. He's not going to hit a lot of big plays, but just in terms of keeping the offense on schedule and then leaning heavily on the run. So can Quinshon Judkins have a 2-touchdown game, which is what we ultimately want from any price range, right? Can he do it? He's lower probability than some of these other guys because his offense has less of a chance of even scoring 2 touchdowns, let alone, the 3 or 4 you typically need for one guy to get 2. But I think he's very much in the mix this week. And so, yeah, and that's sort of how I see running back. I think all of those are sharp plays, and I'm not wasting a tremendous amount of brain power this week trying to sort through that group. It's like, these are great plays. 2 or 3 guys from this group are going to score 25 plus probably, just like the last couple of weeks. And so, find the guys you like the most, but also mix and match a little bit behind that, and hope that you end up on the right combo.
Yeah, there's a couple others I want to ask you about, but I think they might come up when we talk through our building blocks for our lineup build. So I'll save those guys for then. If you guys are watching live, almost 450 of you, we do this show every single Friday afternoon. Please subscribe. If you're already subscribed, hitting that like button helps us out. I also post the audio of these to the In a Vacuum podcast feed if you need to take these on the go. So take advantage of that. And I should also mention this week, the 20% is gone, JM, because we have doubled it, 40% off. Promo code, is it Pete 40, right? We'll get the 40% off.
Yeah, Pete 40. So Pete still takes 20% off week passes or the Bink machine, our optimizer. The price is already dropped, right? And you don't need a code for that. So you take 20%, additional 20% off of the dropped price, rest of season price there. So the code Pete still takes 20% off of other things. OWS for life takes 20% off that. But yeah, Pete 40 for just if you want rest of season annual pass takes 40% off for the last, I don't know, it's certainly more than 60% of the season remaining, 67% plus playoffs. You take 40% off the price there.
And the other thing, I saw this too in the email and on the site, Player Grid is going to be free for anybody.
Yeah,
this week, right?
yeah. Aaron would be upset with me if we didn't bring that up. Yeah, my Player Grid's free this week. I think Hilo's End Around, which is not a Player Grid, but it's his strategy article. Pappy's Player Grid, Sonic's MME Player Pool, Mike's Player Grid for FanDuel and DraftKings, all free this week. So if you are an OWS free member, then you have access to all of those. If you're not an OWS free member, it's free to sign up and we don't spam you with anything. So you get free access to all the player grids this week. And yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I would have forgotten that. So if you want to see my player pool and also my Pete always brings up my Sunday morning update. Like I go in and I basically drop what my exposures are and like angles on how I'm playing those exposures. And so that's worth checking out this week for free as well.
Some really cool charts here too from Bear Claw by the numbers here, just getting quick glance at where these teams are succeeding and failing, explosive plays. So you can certainly get a good high level view from the slate from this stuff here as well.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, let's head over to wide receiver, where of course we always have a lot of ground to cover. I mean, everything with wide receiver these days starts with Puka Nacua, the number one player in fantasy. 8,700. Is that still too cheap for what Puka Nacua has been doing in this matchup?
Yeah, it's funny. What was it, like 2 weeks ago where he was 7,800? And I said, like, probably within 5 weeks, 6 weeks, we're going to look back and realize that this price was too low. It happened pretty fast.
Yeah.
But I do think this is viable, right? We've seen this with Justin Jefferson, with Kirk Cousins, when that offense was humming. We've seen this with Tyreek Hill in his, number one player in the NFL season. This is a viable price tag to pay for one of these wide receivers. It's the same thing as Christian McCaffrey. You're not playing him for the tournament win, but you are playing him for the high likelihood of 20 plus points, 25, 26, 27 points. Again, the 39 pointer from week 4, like that's less likely here. That's always less likely. You need special things to happen to get one of those, but it's within the range of outcomes. And so that's another component of playing Puka is you're accounting for that. You're almost certainly going to get a solid score, and most other people are getting that solid score. So then you're kind of you're saying, hey, let me just take the same square as a lot of other people, not try to beat people on this square, while also recognizing that within the range of outcomes is a 40-pointer or a 45-pointer where it's like, oh gosh, I had to have this guy, right? We've seen Antonio Brown put up a 55-pointer at 50% owned. We've seen Javonte Adams put up a 45-pointer at 50% owned. We've seen Puka put up this 39-pointer at 50% owned. That didn't win you a tournament, but if you didn't have it, you're not winning a tournament that week. And so what I like about somebody like Puka is the floor is so high, and if you can make the salary fit, it's a very sharp play. So he's not a guy I'm starting rosters with because his likeliest outcome is these 24 to 26, 27 points. If a roster doesn't have him, I'm probably going to be fine if it's a good roster, and then if he ends up at this higher end of his range, like I will have him on rosters. And so I'm still live on the week. So same thing as I've been kind of probably 30 to 50% Puka on my rosters and then 30, 50% of my bankroll on Puka and then still give myself opportunity to play the slate other ways. But especially my Bryce Young builds. I had like all my practice builds at the start of the week were like Bryce Young, Puka, it's like you can fit him in so easily when you start with Bryce Young and Rico Dowdle that I think he's a very strong way to play this slate.
I'd say the other, I guess, 3 guys there, and maybe you splice them into mini tiers, but the next in line after Puka, JSN, who I think, pretty clearly been operating as the second best wide receiver this year, Puka, who's on absolute fire, specifically with the touchdowns, and then George Pickens too, in this nice game environment. What do you think about those 3?
Yeah, we should ask my kids what they think about George Pickens. They love his name, so they just run around the house going, George Pickens.
That's funny.
So JSN, yeah, again, it's a question of volume, right? Like on a per pass basis, on a per route basis, he's Puka Nacua this year. It's just that we see this volume. You pulled it up on the screen. It's, last 4 games, 9 targets, 5, 6, 9. And some of these have been competitive, higher scoring games. And so, yeah, that's the one concern with JSN. He's a tier below Puka is kind of how I look at it. And I've built a bunch of Bryce Young, JSN, Puka rosters. I've built a bunch of Bryce Young, JSN, Christian McCaffrey, Bryce Young, Puka, McCaffrey, just to mess around with the different ways that you can build with Bryce Young and that cheap price tag. But yeah, I think JSN's very much in play. The ceiling's high, the floor is high. Just the floor isn't as high as Puka, right? And so you have this opportunity for one of these, like we've seen it, the 13-pointer, 20.6, 21.3, 23.4. Those are not the Puka scores. Like, hey, 26 points every week. Come in the door and just take it. So yeah, JSN's a tier below, but still very live on this slate. Puka, I think for me, is probably more on Baker and Mac Jones rosters because, like you said, he's been running hot with the touchdowns. The targets are just not like confidently there enough, right? He has 1 double-digit target game. We've got 6, 7, 8, 10, 7. Yeah, Chris Godwin's out, but like, are we really expanding Ibuka's targets? Is he suddenly seeing 10, 12, 13? I don't think so. It just seems to be the way they're playing this offense. Now, granted, he's a rookie going into his 6th game. So with a new offensive coordinator also. So like these things can develop over time. And we could see that deeper into the year, Puka is getting like 11, 12, 13 targets most weeks. But that doesn't seem to be where things are trending right now. And so I like Puka as part of a bet on that game environment of him continuing this scorching pace, but not necessarily isolating him as a one-off. George Pickens, again, Carolina, teams tend to tilt toward the run against Carolina. Carolina's been good against wide receivers this year. So similar setup to the Jets last week where it's like I'll mix in some Pickens on my stacks around this game. He's not a priority for me, but there's certainly opportunity for him to hit is how I'm looking at Pickens this week.
Let's see here on the, the value front, kind of per usual. I'm not seeing, anything jumping out a ton. I mean, we can get down to the 5K range. Everyone is done touching the hot stove that is Jacoby Myers. It seems like people are cooling a little on Keenan as well, but Chris Olave still hanging in there, 5,100. Everyone's saying one of these weeks it will happen. And is this the week for Chris Olave or no?
Yeah, one of these weeks, his 7-yard curl routes are gonna. Yeah, I mean, these are not fluky, right? He's got exactly 54 to 59 yards in 4 of his 5 games. He does see the occasional downfield target. It's not all short, but it's rare, right? We saw with Shaheed last week. He hit not from catching a short pass and taking it to the house, but on a downfield throw. It can happen for Olave. It's low probability, and I would think that we see a lot of Christian Gonzalez on him this week, or we see like what the Patriots used to do when they had Revis, which is like put Christian Gonzalez on the number 2 guy. Now, in this case, that might be Rashid Shaheed, who's also kind of a number 1 in this offense, but put him on the number 2 guy and then double team Olave. But either way, they're going to have attention on Olave where I don't necessarily see this as the spot where he finally breaks through for the tournament winner. And if he does, like it's probably still 20 points, 21 points, probably not a score that I can't win without. I actually like a lot in this range. I mean, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is cooking for about 5 or 6 quarters now. Does that sustain? I don't know. He's going back to play in Indianapolis, which is interesting, right? He grew up there, watched his dad play.
Ooh, I forgot about that angle.
And yeah, I think this is a spot where this offense has been pretty, wildly inconsistent and not smooth, and it's disjointed. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look right. But I think they can put enough together that the ceiling's there for Marvin Harrison Jr. Going up, a little bit higher. Maybe you were skipping over this range intentionally, and I'm throwing things off. But I think Quentin Johnston remains very much in play against this bad Miami secondary. I think Zay Flowers is in play if you like these Rams pieces, because I think there's a scenario again where the Ravens are able to keep this game competitive. Tedero and McMillan, we touched on. Jalen Waddle is a solid option this week. So yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot to think about in this sort of 6 point. And Brian Thomas Jr., again, we've talked since week one about like, he's never really clicked with Trevor Lawrence, and the targets haven't been there. And so like, I think 6,200 is still a little bit pricey, not for Brian Thomas Jr.'s talent or for, the scheme and structure of this offense, but just like what we've seen over almost, a year and a half now of him and, or I guess a full season, right? Trevor Lawrence healthy last year, the start of this year, but a full season's worth of games between he and Trevor Lawrence. It hasn't really clicked yet, but I think it's viable. And then depending on how injuries shake out with the 49ers, somebody here is viable. Juwan Jennings, Kendrick Bourne. I mean, what luck that Kendrick Bourne's blow up was not on the main slate, right?
I know.
Kendrick Bourne as this Mac Jones partner since the start, and then he goes out and does it not on the main slate. But yeah, I think there's a lot of viable options here. It's an interesting range because it's a lot of guys with ceiling but low floors and like low consistency. So yeah, there's a lot to sort through here. And it's not a pretty week at pass catcher, but that's across the board, right? Like outside of Puka, you don't love what you're paying for anybody. And so I think JSN is like the next most comfortable and confident play just from like a raw points standpoint where you're like, yeah, I wish he was a little bit cheaper, maybe 7,100 or something. But like the raw points you feel good about, the opportunity you feel good about, the passing offense and his role in the passing offense. Everything else is kind of like, yeah, this guy can hit. This guy can hit. I don't think I'm going to get too – I'm not going to like go to a guy like Olave who – I mean, this offense hasn't scored more than 20 points, right? They scored 26 points last week. That was the defensive touchdown. I don't think I'm going to Olave at high ownership because I think there's like other plays that are as good as him or better than him. And I think it's all sort of randomness. And so that's not the place where I want to side with high ownership is where it's like Josh Jacobs. And it's like, yeah, that's a clear, strong play. Or Puka. If I lose because a higher variance play or a lower consistency play hits at high ownership, I'm always okay with that. So yeah, I'll be looking elsewhere this week.
Well, speaking of cheap wide receivers and the Packers, thoughts on Romeo Doubs and Matthew Golden? I mean, obviously the most likely scenario is they get this done on the ground and they don't need to throw a ton, but say the Bengals are somehow plucky, say that this gets a back and forth. Do you see any scenarios where those wide receivers could be in the mix?
Yeah, I keep coming back to Golden in my thinking. I haven't built a roster with Golden. I haven't included him in my player pool so far, and I may not, but I think he's very viable. And I would be biased toward him over Doubs because Doubs, you're banking on the 2 or 3 touchdown game, whereas Golden, you're banking on the big play. I'd rather bank on the big play, but I think both guys are viable. And because of their price tags, I don't think either guy is going to draw ownership. So there's some value there as well.
Anything else like down under 5K, or if you're feeling really adventurous under 4K, any dumpster divers for the people? You normally have 1 or 2 for us.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's actually a handful of interesting ones this week. I think Ryan Flanoy is like a legit part of this offense. Obviously, we don't have George Pickens on Sauce Gardner this week, so that limits some of the opportunity for him to see these targets. If Juwan Jennings is out, Demarcus Robinson saw 7 targets last week, and we forget that Demarcus Robinson like consistently has like 15 to 20 point scores. A couple of years ago, he had 5 games in a row of like 14 to 20 points. Last year, he had a couple of games of 14 to 20 points when he has to be featured in an offense. And he's also one of these guys, right? He's played for the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Rams, and the 49ers. He's one of these guys that like good teams and good coaches like him because there's something that he does he does a good job in the offense, right? So he's on the field if there's enough injuries, and then he's capable of producing. So I think he's kind of a hidden value if Juwan Jennings misses. Alec Iomanor and Chimere DK. Like DK saw 33 out of 67 snaps last week. It was his highest snap share of the season. Saw 5 targets. Look at these target counts, right? 0 in week 4, but he's got 5, 4, 5 in weeks 2, 3, and 5. Those are primarily downfield looks. And he's so fast, and most of the time he's past the defense and Cam Ward just misses him, right? But all it takes is one of those hitting, and all of a sudden you have one of these 3 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown type of games at 3K in salary. DK also, I'm going to spend too much time on this guy for like, I don't actually like him, but I just think the angles here are interesting. He had a wide receiver screen last week. I think he had another short area reception last week to where they're getting him involved in the offense. And then he's their punt returner and kick returner. So if you like the Titans as a cheap defense against the Raiders, there is opportunity there for DK to score a return touchdown and you to be able to count that double because, you get the 6 points for the defense, special teams, and for DK, that's 5.4K for those two guys. So yeah, no, I do think that he's like legit viable. I kind of mentioned him earlier in the week as a must play in like the Millie Maker, DK plus the Titans as a must play stack in the Millie Maker. But I do think he's viable on like 5% of bankroll and single entry 3-max as well. So I'm going to keep him in consideration as just a way to save salary on like one roster this week.
There you go. That was the old school. I think it was Peter Jennings back in the day when he had the DFS Edge podcast with Left-Handed Smiz. He used to always talk about the double dip.
The double dip on a defense, especially, we rarely get it. But and now with the with the new return rules, like the probability of getting it is higher than it's been in the past.
Yeah.
And you're getting a defense that there's not a lot of standout defenses this week. If you're going to go cheap, the Titans are certainly one of the viable ones down there against this, turnover happy Raiders team. So it actually makes sense. I got onto it because I built a roster very early in the week with JSN and Puka, and I had exactly 5.4K in salary left. And it was like, is there any way to do this? And then you're like, oh my gosh, this is great. So it actually is viable this week.
There you go. Even we got totally not the FBI is very upset that you're giving away this secret sauce here.
He's going to get bumped from like 0.3% to 0.35% owned off of this. So hopefully we can still win a tournament if he hits.
You know what? I think we need to reframe. It's always been, don't dupe me, bro. I don't want to have my lineup duplicated. I think it's more, this would just be so fun to have someone else to celebrate this happening with.
Oh my gosh.
You could just hold hands and skip around with our double dip hitting. There you go. All right, let's head to tight end here. As we move along, we got probably no Brock Bowers this week. So on the high end, pretty strong, relatively speaking, with McBride, Ferguson, Warren, and I'll include Kraft in the mix there at the high end. What do you think of those guys?
Yeah. By the way, I ran hot at tight end last week. I did with no Tyler Warren on my builds, which I still liked him. I just had none of him. And he was like the lowest scoring of the guys. And the rest was Darren Waller and Jake Ferguson. And who was the other one who hit? It was like somebody else who hit. And it was just like, how is this happening? I'm getting like 18 plus points at every tight end spot on the week. Don't expect that to happen again. But so I think Ferguson stands out the most, but I think it's pretty clumped up. I'll go out on a limb and say I have not gotten on board with the Tucker Kraft love.
Okay.
And this stretches back a while. Like, I know he looks great with the ball in his hands, but like the targets aren't there. And they're playing Cincinnati, right? I mean, like, what score is he putting up that buries me at a 4,700 price tag? I guess is how I keep looking at him. So if people get, I guess he can put up 27.4, right? But like, if people get the big game and I don't get it, I have to be okay with that because I'm probably not paying 4,700 for a guy who's consistently seeing like 4 to 5 targets in an offense that does spread the ball around. So when that happens, I just sort of stamp it in as an edge and then hope I'm not wrong. Tucker Kraft, I think he's a solid play. He's just not where I'm going because I don't think he's winning me a tournament. And I think that the floor is lower than some of these other guys. Jake Ferguson, Tyler Warren, you know how involved they're going to be in their offenses. Jake Ferguson, you're banking on the touchdowns because a lot of short area throws, but it's a good spot for it, right? Because the Panthers have done well against wideouts. They've not done well against tight ends. Trey McBride is always in the mix. We're probably overstating how much he's always in the mix, right? Because even last year, it was like tight end is thin and he's always scoring like 12 to 18 points. But he only had like the one, maybe it was two like high end games, like 28.7 or something like that. Maybe one other high end game because he doesn't score the touchdowns, because this offense isn't good. And this offense looks worse in like every metric this year than they did last year. And so, I think that McBride is very viable, but he's also not, I think he's a guy that people are overstating how viable he is. And that's sort of my take on these high-end guys. To me, Ferguson and Warren stand out above the others, but I'm not like, I don't think it's bad to play Tucker Kraft. To be clear, I'm just not playing him. And I certainly don't think it's bad to play McBride. He's not really heavy focus for me this week, but he's sort of one of these guys who's on my list, but I haven't actually manually put him on a roster yet. And so that sort of shows where I'm at in my thinking with him.
One thing I wanted to ask you about the Cardinals, because it does seem like you like Marv a little bit. Do you have a preference on if it's Kyler or Jacoby? It does sound like Kyler was back at practice today, but any thoughts there? I mean, just because Kyler's been so disappointing himself.
Yeah, I've wondered that. You know what's funny? Watching Spencer Rattler the other day, I was like, what's the gap between Rattler and Kyler? You know? And then I looked at their stats and they're like identical. Like passing yards, like everything is identical. I think Rattler has like 50 fewer rushing yards, and that's it, right? Touchdowns, interceptions. And then I watched Kyler, and it's like, no, he is different. You know, like the speed at which he moves is different. The aggressiveness, the downfield aggressiveness is different. So the ceiling is still higher, right? But we just haven't seen it. Yeah, I've had that question this week. So Brissett, it's harder to just like visualize him taking these back shoulder downfield shots, right? I remember in that game against the Bengals last year for the Patriots, and it was like, boy, that ball moves through the air slowly. Like, you know, it's like Brissett at this point in his career doesn't have a lot of zip on his passes. So he's a better passer than Kyler, but he's also less likely, I would think, to push the ball downfield. Which is where we're really looking for Marvin Harrison Jr. because he's not getting like 10 or 11 or 12 targets. We're hoping he hits some of these big plays. So I think I would lean more toward McBride if Brissett is under center. And then if it's Kyler, I'm leaning more toward Marvin Harrison Jr.
A couple of these other kind of value plays, Jake Tungus coming off of, an 11 target game. We might get Michael Mayer, who's been practicing in full with no Brock Bowers. Any of these other value options jump out to you?
Yeah, I like Tungus. I think David Njoku is, a tremendous play at 3,500. Against a defense that always gets hit by tight ends, sort of structurally gets hit by tight ends. And that has continued this year. And Dylan Gabriel last week, wasn't throwing outside the numbers. He was hitting Fannin and Njoku over and over again. So I think 3,500 is a great price there. And yeah, those are kind of the two guys down here who stand out as strong on paper plays. Obviously, Hunter Henry's in the mix, Darren Waller's in the mix. I think that the Ravens tight ends are on the fringes of being in the mix. And you can even get down to like Jatavian Sanders or Michael Mayer or Taysom Hill. Like there's a lot of guys you can viably consider this week. But I do think that if you're just saying on paper who are the best plays, I think it's Njoku and Tungus down here.
Yeah, the Taysom stuff's interesting with Juwan Johnson and Kamara both banged up. I'll be really curious to see those practice reports. I mean, the more of those guys you remove from the mix, he starts to really pop there a good bit. But let's build a lineup here. We got kind of one game and some teams that I'm excited to dive in that you teased previously before the show with the block. So without further ado, let's head over to DraftKings and build a lineup. All right, JM, we got a blank slate here. Where are we starting? I know you kind of had a few different places we could have gone this week. We ultimately settled on this one, though. Yeah,
so what we're going to do here is we're going to throw Trevor Lawrence and JSN block onto here. So I'm isolating Trevor Lawrence and JSN as a block, not because I'm playing this and not playing Jags pieces, but because this dramatically elevates Trevor Lawrence hitting for a tournament winner, which, we always say the moment we put a player on a roster, we are saying that they're going to have a tournament winning game, right? Because otherwise, why are we playing them? So maybe you put Lawrence on 1 out of 20 rosters, the other 19 rosters, you're saying Trevor Lawrence doesn't post a tournament winner, but on this one roster, we say Trevor Lawrence posts a tournament winner. Well, if Trevor Lawrence is posting a tournament winner, how is that happening? That's happening in a game where they're being forced to be aggressive throughout the game. There's a lot of points piling up. And if that's happening, then we have a game where, the second best wide receiver in football this year, who's only being held back by volume, is definitely getting more volume in this spot. And so I think this idea of how does JSN have his highest end run out? Well, the clearest path is for Trevor Lawrence to have a big game. Trevor Lawrence over Sam Darnold here because with the banged up Seattle secondary and with the fact that Darnold has been running the ball a lot more recently, Lawrence has been running the ball a lot more recently, kind of gives us this opportunity for this double dip. And we know that the Jags are going to be more Trevor Lawrence centric than the Seahawks are going to be Sam Darnold centric because that entire offense is built off the run, bringing in these two running backs to run the ball. And so, I just think this is a great way to play JSN to say, How does he get there? Well, if Trevor Lawrence is getting there, it dramatically increases the chances of JSN getting there and puts the math in our favor. A quick note on Trevor Lawrence. So if we take out his rookie year where he had one game of 25 plus DraftKings points, it was actually his first game of his career, which is kind of funny. If I remember correctly, he had 3 touchdowns and 3 picks in that game, and then kind of reined it in. Urban Meyer started kicking people and getting lap dances at the bar and whatever else happened that season, and things kind of fell apart. But take out that, right? Just since that point, 22.9% of his games, so almost 25% of the games, basically 23% of his games have gone for 24.9 or more DraftKings points, which at 5.1K in salary, that's like basically saying almost a quarter of his games have gone for 5x his salary. So we talk about this all the time. The DraftKings generally prices players in such a way that they'll generally hit about 4x their salary 20 to 25% of the time. Lawrence has done it across his career, essentially taking out his rookie year. He's done it he's done 23% of the time, but 5x his salary. So the thing about Lawrence is you look at the game logs and it's like, boy, when he misses hard, but we're not trying to cash in tournaments. We're trying to win tournaments. And when he hits, he's hitting for these 5x plus scores. Really, he's like a 6K quarterback when he's on his mark, when he's on the money, when he's playing well. And it just so happens that he's priced at 5.1K because his lows are so low. This offense is like, this whole team is so good minus Trevor Lawrence. He's like the one thing holding them back. And it's not tools, it's not ability, it's just consistency, right? And so what I've been saying with Bryce Young this week is like, I liken Bryce Young to Clay Buchholz. So for any baseball fans, Clay Buchholz, his second career start. So he's kind of like this touted prospect for the Red Sox. His second career start, he threw a no-hitter. But his career, he was basically like a number 3 pitcher. Every once in a while, he would have a game where it was like, oh, wow, this guy could be an ace. Every once in a while, he'd have a game where it's like, is this the worst pitcher in baseball? And then most of the time, he was just sort of that number 3 pitcher, right? Well, that's what separates Bryce Young is like, he puts together these ace-type games. It's just that most of the time, he's not that. And every once in a while, he's the number 5 pitcher. Trevor Lawrence is kind of the same way, where it's like, their high end is really high end. If they can put it together for a whole game, they can put up these huge DraftKings scores. It's just that they're priced low because most of the time they're putting up kind of this middling score or even this bad score. So Trevor Lawrence is a very interesting way to play this slate. And I like the idea of throwing JSN onto any Trevor Lawrence roster. And I like the idea of kind of boosting Trevor Lawrence a little bit for saying, how do we get the highest end run out from JSN? It is through Trevor Lawrence having a big game. So JSN, Trevor Lawrence start there on this roster.
A funny amount people are liking the baseball references here. And then also I will say there was way too much consensus and applauding for our Jared Goff block last week. It's good to know that people are questioning Trevor Lawrence. That's how we know we're on the right track with a good tournament play.
But hey, I like it because like I think the narrative, the public narrative has kind of shifted to like, hey, this was Trevor Lawrence's signature game. He's kind of arrived in this Liam Cohen offense. And it's like, no, you guys just want that to be the case, like the down-to-down consistency is still not there. It still doesn't look right cohesively and comprehensively. And so, shout out to the chat for being low on this. I'm low on it too. It's just the nature of this week. It's like I'm choosing between Bryce Young and Trevor Lawrence. Like that's sort of the way this slate shapes up. And it's not because I don't think Drake May is a better quarterback or whoever else we can talk about. It's because of where can the game environments ascend to where we're getting tournament winners. I don't see the Saints creating that game environment for the Patriots, just using that example. So I think Drake May outscores these guys on average, but the high end for these guys is higher than the high end for Drake May. Like the tournament wins are likely to come from these guys. And so, I'm with you guys. I don't like the Trevor Lawrence play, but it makes sense if we're trying to win a tournament.
Well, I assume you're not going to roll them out naked. It is kind of an interesting setup. Brian Thomas Jr. Is obviously there. Hunter Long stepping in for Brenton Strange, maybe a little Parker Washington love. Would you block it with Travis Etienne? Like, where do we go with this?
Yeah, I was diving deep into like the Hunter Long research.
Yeah,
like getting his college stats and his transactions throughout the NFL. He pops in optimizers, but he pops because he projects for like 7 or 8 points at 2,500. Like the ceiling isn't all that high. I think you can go BTJ. Like we're going further and further down the risk curve the more we add here, but we're also saying we get a tournament win. I also think you can go Etienne. Etienne's kind of in this. We have so many good running backs on this slate, and I sort of threw Quinshon Judkins in as like yeah, he's not as good as these other guys, but he could outscore them. And then another rung down the ladder from there is Etienne, where it's like he's not as good of a play as any of these guys above him, but he could outscore them. And I think that there's a scenario where the game where Trevor Lawrence is hitting is also a game where Etienne's hitting. But let's go more straightforward and put Brian Thomas Jr. on here. And then you know what I want to do next? I want to put Puka on here because I want to see how we can pull this off. Because I think that if we're doing something like this, I want this high floor and consistency of Puka so that if this hits, this is how I like to think about these things. If we're taking a lower percentage block, which we're probably doing in most quarterback spots this week, but if we're taking a lower percentage block, I want to say, if it hits, I want to make sure I'm not throwing away this roster. So if it hits, let me just ride the ownership on Puka. And I do think salary-wise, we'll be able to figure this one out, especially with, the running back position providing what it provides. We can throw in Njoku at tight end because we like the play. He's 3,500. It's going to save us some salary. We can throw in Rico Dowdle because we like the play and we know it saves us some salary. We can throw in one of these other lower cost running backs. I have a feeling we might need to go down to Judkins to make it all work, but let's try Javonte so that we get this bet on this game environment between Rico Dowdle and Javonte. If this doesn't work, we can always go down to Flanoy at wide receiver. But we actually might be able to pull this off because there's no Pete, I've run so hot at defense this year. I've gotten 14 plus points every week at defense, mostly just from taking the defense against Cam Ward. But now we have the Raiders who are pretty bad on defense, right? So it's there's no defense I feel confident in this week. So yeah, going down to the Titans and saying, can we make this work? I think is viable. Okay, so 4,100, we're just off the Jalen Coker play. We got Torrey Horton, but we are taking on. Okay, we have Torrey Horton betting on this game environment. Isn't he 4,100 this week?
Yeah.
No, we have 4,300 in salary. My bad.
We have 4,300.
Yeah,
I got real excited for a sec because I saw TETN. I was like, whoa, we can pull it off. That's his much cheaper younger brother.
Yeah, that happened to me the other day in the Bink machine. I honestly think, I kind of think I don't love this roster. I would mess around with this more if we were really building this. And again, this is just sort of thoughts and ideas on how we can put something together. Jalen Coker, but also if we go down from Javonte Williams to Judkins, we do have an extra 500. Actually, let's do that. Let's go down to Judkins.
Because I was going to ask, just as we do that, thoughts on, I think people generally kind of shy away from playing two running backs in the same game.
Yeah.
Just thinking if Rico's, rushing for 200 yards, it might not mean a ton of opportunities for the other running back there. How do you think about that in general with the Javonte Rico plays, liking them each individually?
Yeah, and then people are usually like, oh, both guys are involved in the pass game, so whichever team is ahead, there's still a run out here. But the way I look at it is most of our value ultimately comes from touchdowns. And if we have a 36-31 game, which is possible here, then all of a sudden, and I don't scoff at that, but you go back to the Panthers game logs, they have these games. They have these games where their offense puts it all together. And they did it against the Falcons. They scored 30 points. Obviously, the defense was part of that, but they have these games where they score 30 plus points. And if they're going to do it against anybody, the Cowboys would be a team to do it against. The Cowboys can score points against the Panthers. If we have one of those games, we could just have Javonte scoring 2 or 3 touchdowns and Dowdle scoring 2 or 3 touchdowns. And so it doesn't necessarily matter how they're getting there. It's just if the points are being scored, those points are available. So yeah, I'm fine with generally more fine in the field with playing 2 running backs in the same game because the field sort of overrates the danger of that. So what we have here going up to 4,800, which is sort of a tipping point for me at pricing because Trey Tucker is here and Juwan Jennings is here. Trey Tucker is high variance, but he's heavily involved in the offense. And so what I'm wanting to do is say, where do I get as much certainty as possible, right? And so if we go up to Javonte Williams, we're adding a little bit more certainty over Quinshon Judkins, but we're taking on a lot more uncertainty at this other spot because we're saying, does Jalen Coker get enough snaps in his first game back? Or does Torrey Horton get the downfield play? And does it make sense to have Torrey Horton without Sam Darnold? I think it's a viable way to build it, but we're taking on a lot more certainty with if Juwan Jennings is healthy, he's a very sharp play in this spot. And if he's a 6K wide receiver if he's featured in this offense, right? Juwan Jennings as the number 1 for San Francisco is a 6K wide receiver. That's where he should be priced. And that would be his role if he's playing this week in a game that we like, the game environment. And then Trey Tucker, the inconsistency is going to be there because of the nature of his role and how bad this offense is. But you're talking about a guy, take out the 2 target game, but he's got, 6, 9, and 8 across 3 of his last 4 games. He's heavily involved. He's on the field all the time. He has a downfield role. He's capable of hitting for a big score from anywhere on the field. So he's more viable to me than those 4,200, 4,100 guys. So yeah, this 4,800 is sort of a tipping point for me price range wise. So getting down to Judkins, opening up the salary for, let's throw Jauan Jennings on here and say he's playing this week. I think is a viable way and a sharp way to wrap up this roster, and actually turns it more into something that I do really like this week.
One nice thing too, just a little late swap angle there with both Jennings and Trey Tucker at this price point. You can wait around for news on Jennings, and if for some reason he doesn't go, then you got that clean pivot to Tucker there as well.
I like it. Yep.
So here's the final team for our audio listeners. I do really like how this one turned out. Lawrence, Rico, Judkins, JSN, Brian Thomas in that game. Puka paying up for him. Njoku, so 2 Browns. And then kind of that one-off flex down there, Jauan Jennings, and then Titans defense to make it work. So I know we hit like a couple dead ends there, but I really like the story this one tells.
Yeah, and Njoku, Judkins work together. I've kind of run through the numbers in my journal this week of playing those 2 together. It is viable. Even with the Browns not being a great offense. So this is kind of what this week looks like, right? It's not a week where you're going to come away with a lot of rosters where you're like, God, I feel tremendous about that roster. And so this is, if we're talking about winning a tournament, this is about as good of a path as we can find as any. So I really like the way this one kind of came together there at the end.
I guess one quick question here, because we didn't get into a ton of the stuff with the Saints. If for some reason Kamara sits, like how does Kendre Miller crack those top running back plays for you, or is there still too much opportunity cost?
No, he doesn't crack the top running back plays for me because the Patriots have been one of the top run defenses in football, and I'm sure that they're happy to say, Spencer Rattler, see if you can beat us. I think he's viable in large field play if Kamara misses. I won't be going there on tighter builds would be how I would look at that one personally.
Okay, awesome. Well, JM, pleasure as always talking through with you. Like we mentioned earlier, make sure you guys take advantage of a few offers going on. We got the up to 40% off with promo code Pete40 for those Inner Circle and DFS subs. If you just want to try out the weekly pass or some of the other ones there, the promo code Pete for 20% off will always work. And regardless, just go and sign up for a free account so you guys can get the free player grids this week, a special promotion that is not normally in front of the paywall there. So take advantage of that. Anything else I'm forgetting, Jam?
Yeah, just run over to the site and go to the scroll. And if you're an OWS free member, you'll just have access to a lot of stuff this week. So balance off your research with some of our thoughts, and let's go win some money this week.
Sounds good. All right, Jam. I will see you next Friday. Good luck this week. And we'll see you atop the leaderboards. And now it is time for Bully the Sims with Youdacao. All right, there he is. Youdacao joining us here from a new location. No realtors barging in this week, Youda?
No, not this time. I hope not. I'm in a hotel here, so
okay.
I had to pivot after what happened.
That's right. You said, I can't let this happen again. I am going to rent a hotel specifically to do this show, I'm sure is the case there. How did your week 5 go? Did you have any Rico Dowdle? We were talking about him a bit.
I was under Dowdle, so overall not good. I think I had some very good shots on goal, but not enough shots on goal that if the few I had were to not hit, I could come out with anything. So
yeah. Well, there you go. It happens. You kind of needed. There were some chalky pieces that got home last week. I was looking at the winning Millie Maker lineup. It had Fields and Breece Hall on it. Had that JSN and a Puka mini. We were dancing around some of those topics there, but none of them really got home.
Yeah, I was super high Seattle, but that was more from a team standpoint.
Yeah,
probably ran bad there because I think it's like Tampa wasn't able to run the ball that game, but Seattle was running pretty well. And so usually when you have that advantage, you wouldn't lose the turnover battle like 2-0, if I recall.
Yeah.
I guess pretty fluky turnovers too.
So what are What is your process like after a slate? Like, are you reviewing post-lock sims? Are you reviewing your lineups? Are you watching tape? Like, what does kind of post-mortem on a slate look like for you?
Just whatever comes to mind. Nothing consistent, actually. I'll do some degree of post-lock sims if I feel like I was really off or missing something. And I'll also see how like other players are going about stuff, but nothing actually repetitive.
Yeah, that makes sense. That it's more just stuff that if you feel like there's a specific leak, you'll look into it, but you're not going to have like a set, list of check marks that you're going through.
Yeah.
All right, let's pull this up and got Run the Sims here. I should also mention right now, if you guys are watching this show, we're obviously going to talk ball, talk this slate. Yesterday on Lulz with Brick, we had Shady Advice on, and we did kind of like a deeper dive explainer into his portfolio diversity tool. Got to hear kind of his definition for it, how he thinks about it. Also got to preview some of the new features coming to Run the Sim. So if you're more interested in what's going on in the site, how to use the sim tools specifically, highly recommend checking that out. Always fun talking with Shady Advice there. But let's kind of start, Youda, just high level on this slate. We have some big totals here, a few injury situations. I know we were talking a little bit before the show on slates like this, you're maybe a little more willing to onslaught than normal.
Yeah, definitely. So there's not too many games on the slate, but also the salaries are rather loose this week, and so you could kind of get to whatever you want. That's not necessarily great for that's not necessarily a great argument for onslaughts, because you'd rather like sort of overall you want like lower projections, so correlation gets some more value. But I think the way it sets up is that pricing allows you to onslaught fairly easily without sort of just stacking ownership, in that like I don't think the stacks that you might come across in like onslaughts really in any of the spots are just like all the chalk in the same onslaught, which is actually kind of normal.
When you are thinking about like onslaughting, are you starting like globally and saying like QB plus 3 players from a team, and then let me see what's popping? Or are you saying like, say on the Michael Penix week, like this is the offense I want to onslaught, and then I'm going to run stuff from like the micro and go in the other direction?
You probably couldn't predetermine. Really, you wouldn't have to think about it at all if your sim was good enough. But I was just looking at the pricing a little bit, what you can get to with the QBs, how you could afford everything. That it seemed pretty appealing relative to other weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially because, I mean, one of the situations that is hard to onslaught is when you're paying up for the quarterback, and we don't have Hurts, no Mahomes, no Allen. So if they all are more pocket passer quarterbacks that are cheaper, then it seems to make sense that it would be an on.
Yeah. And then there's also only 3 late games. And those are relatively, aren't the more appealing games. You can argue a little bit with like San Francisco, Tampa, but you can almost like disregard late swap for a lot of this, because like it's at this week, there's sort of higher odds that the pole position in like the afternoon can hold after the first game's done.
On the onslaught conversation, I mean, it seems like most of the time when we discuss them, it is because the pieces are on the cheaper side. How do you handle, say, a spot like the Rams this week, where people are very excited to face the Ravens? Puka's expensive, Adams, Stafford's even kind of relatively expensive comparatively. So like, would you shy away from that? Or would you ever find spots of just saying, I love this spot so much, I'll make it work?
So like the Rams aren't necessarily in so much of an onslaught conversation, because it's sort of like it's more of like a tight target concentration, and you're not really going to get to all 3 in a lot of cases, just because it's actually so tight that like to the point where the double stack gets there a lot, but the triple, it's rather hard. Yeah. But specifically their chalk is kind of all on Kyren Williams and Puka. So it's very hard to sort of settle on a right decision there because like there's only 3 guys. 2 of them are really owned. 1 of them is kind of owned, and just personally, I don't think all 3 get there.
I'm sure we'll touch on it maybe as we go throughout, but are there any teams that you think set themselves up for onslaughts particularly well this week?
You can really argue just for so many. Like the chalky game would be Dallas, Carolina, and with the Dallas injuries, it's every pass catcher running back that they field. So like realistically, you could actually do Dak +5, I guess here.
Wow.
Right, just running back all the receivers because they're just too cheap. Roll relative with like the roll relative to sort of pricing, and then the matchup's good, and then like Dak's playing well. So it's like I can't really say. You can't really say that it's like a bad chalk situation just because it's all value and you could correlate all of it and it's not extreme owned.
Yeah. What about on the other side? I mean, we were talking
the situation and the matchup are aligning too hard. And on the other side, I guess you would only feel great about McMillan. I suppose Dowdle too. I just think there's a little bit of anti-correlation Dowdle to Dallas and Dowdle to maybe even his own team, which was what happened last week.
Yeah. Yeah, the 200 rushing yards didn't leave much available for anyone else.
Right. But like he was pretty efficient with those carries. I can double check, but yeah, 23 carries. It's 23 run plays really is gonna make things harder for everyone else in the game. And he's not really the type to break one off, although he did break a few off, but I'm like not really the guy to like be housing a run from like 70 and just speeding it up.
Yep, and we do Chuba ruled out again, so we are going to get the full-blown Rico Dowdle show plus a revenge game.
It is so cheap that like I wouldn't be opposed to a lot of times I would do like a max 1 Dowdle Javonte. Like you would have screwed yourself last week if you did that with the Colts. And like I was not necessarily suggesting that either, but I would probably just like open that limitation up slightly to just be like max 2 of like the quarterbacks with the running backs, so we can't get 3.
Yeah,
all 3.
We don't have quite the situation we did last week with the late Rico and like Michael Carter value opening up. I mean, the closest thing we have is this Chargers running back situation. If we want to talk some input volatility, do you have any read on this Kamani Vidal Haskins, or is it just not DFS relevant this week?
The opportunities cost actually is too much because you have like 5K running backs, 6K running backs that are just projecting nearly twice as these guys.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't really get there. And even on a normal week, I'm not sure they really are willing to sort of like skew the workload heavily toward one of these 2. I think they're pretty happy to like sort of have Herbert manage now.
Yeah, I know. And it's also Haskins is 5K. If he was Stoneman, I think it maybe would be a little more interesting of a conversation having just watched Miami give up 200 plus rushing yards, but I'm with you.
Yeah. I could touch on this now, but like, since there are all these running back values, I don't know if there's a way you could see it from a team view. But like basically every 5K running back is a value. We have, like Jalen Warren, Dowdle, Rashad White, Javonte Williams, Kyron Williams. So 5 guys. That's actually going to make sort of these top end running backs somewhat underowned. And then the combinatorial part where it's like if you're taking 2 of the top end running backs, that's really not going to get owned. because just so many teams are going to have 2 5 to 6K running backs.
That you mentioned Jaylen Warren. That's actually a good input volatility spot to talk about. He misses week 4. They're on bye week 5. Gainwell crushes in week 4. How would you project that backfield split? I have it up right now, 55% Warren, 30%. Does that look about right to you?
Yeah, that looks pretty good. Just Warren's really well. Just like actually, it is a bit of an input volatile spot because Warren's role when he's been in has just been so massive that if you just like were to take that, he's kind of like having like a McCaffrey-esque role here, and Rodgers does sort of prop up these running backs like that because he can't run for himself, so the check down gets elevated. That was more of like assuming that the input volatile part is actually real. It's probably closer to like that like 60-40 rather than like a 70-30 where Warren's McCaffrey. So I wouldn't group Warren in the same as the other guys I mentioned.
It's kind of similar to last week when you were talking about DeMarcado and Carter actually being like similar skill set type players. Like Gainwell and Warren both have that kind of pass catching profile, not like a guy you want to necessarily saddle up with 20 touches. So it does make it hard to project. Yeah.
But like Gainwell does profile as a pure third down pass catcher more so than Warren, though, who can. I'm much more comfortable running him between the tackles, and I'm sure they are too.
Yeah. Right now with the Run the Sims ownership, have Warren at 6%. I know he's projecting really well for ETR as well. He strikes me as a really good play who probably is going to get overlooked in most people's kind of tighter running back pools.
Probably. But like if you were to like sort of take what I said further, if like all the 5 and 6K running backs are heavily owned or owned to some extent, even the 5 to 6K receivers who are arguably going to have more upside than the running backs at the same price are going to be lightly underowned. And it's like not even related. It's only for sort of people optimizing on projection. And that's the only reason why. So it'd be guys like if you went back to the DK list, it'd be like McMillan, Waddle, Metcalf, probably McConkey, Harrison Jr., Johnston.
Yeah.
Those guys might all be 9 to 15%, and then all the running backs I mentioned might be like 15 to 25, 15 to 30.
Yeah, and that's just not going to be a game people want to get into. I think the lowest total on the slate, Cleveland has a 16-point team total. Pittsburgh's 21.5. But I think you could certainly see either Metcalf or Warren kind of consolidate those fantasy points for the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how in play Rodgers is. Yeah, not really. He's not even like that cheap relative to upside, but nothing wrong with the one-offs there.
One other spot I would maybe flag for input volatility is this kind of Niners team as we continue to deal with injuries. It sounds like Jawan Jennings is going to try to play. Pearsall probably out. Kittle out again. Kendrick Bourne goes off on that Thursday night football game. Do you have any kind of thoughts on this pass catching room if Jennings is back?
I mean, I was able to do that was a Thursday night they played. Who was it?
Was it the Rams, right? Yeah.
The Rams. I sort of, since Bourne became default wide receiver 1, that sort of just stood out to me as a Mac Jones, Kendrick Bourne, Patriots getting reunited and comfortable more than anything else. So I don't view that as terribly predictive if we introduce other people into the rotation like a Jawan Jennings. I think he just he played a good game, and then he went to what he was comfortable with. It was working, so they just kept feeding it.
Let's talk your favorite game here on the week. What's jumping out to you?
I like Seattle Jaguars again. I might just be a Seattle homer in the short term.
Do you think? I mean, obviously they they lose that game. But I mean, you were talking about them being undervalued by the market. I mean, their passing game and Darnold are playing awesome.
I mean, it wasn't really an offensive loss. It was more of like a fluke turnover loss or slash like a defensive loss. So, I think these quarterbacks are ramping up. Lawrence has a lot of momentum too after his last game. And if Seattle's defense isn't actually going to be top 15, which I assumed it was, it kind of does make it more appealing, since sort of like they were sort of, the play calling was sort of, I guess, seeing what they had in like the whole revamped system, new quarterback. And I don't think there's much difference between what Darnold has done early in this season compared to like what Justin Herbert did at the start of last year. And it's obviously different schemes and different like heads behind the decision making. But if there's any game that should inspire confidence in opening up your playbook and sort of just like letting him cook, it would be last week with Darnold, because he's still playing out of his mind.
I think what's interesting about getting into this game, and right before you hopped on, JM and I were building something involving Lawrence and JSN. It's basically just how uncomfortable all of the other pieces are if you want to get into this beyond JSN. I guess Barner was the one who went off last week.
No, I mean, at cost, right? Lawrence is probably better than Darnold. I'm just saying from a real life perspective, Darnold is playing better. Yeah. And I mean, Lawrence is just there. He's not playing poorly whatsoever. In fact, he's playing well. He probably just had his best game in a while. He's just getting there at like the elevated rushing rate, which is great. Like if I had to stack, I would also stack Lawrence Thomas rather than Darnold JSN, just because cheaper, the running ability, and then also like you feel much better about where Thomas Jr. is at right now compared to earlier in the season with sort of his two stabilizing games, but the ownership isn't flocking there yet.
Yeah, coming off of 6-7 target games. If you had to get to another pass catcher on the Jags after Thomas, who would it be for you?
I'm not sure. I mean, it would just be Hunter Long, just like knock out the tight end spot. But I don't know if you need that salary or just like ETN.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's interesting, like the way these set up, right? If I remember correctly, I mean, Seahawks secondary really banged up, and they're more of a pass funnel. And then the Jags are kind of the opposite, right? Where they've been easier to run on than throw.
Maybe. I mean, I would have to check, but I don't know if it's like a huge split. Historically, I could look it up really quickly. Yeah, it's close.
Yeah. Well, in a little bit, we can run some of the sims and see what of these lineups are popping up. But it sounds like your preference probably would be to just kind of skinny stack Lawrence stuff.
In this spot, yeah, it's more that I like the game in that quarterbacks are playing so well that it increases the sort of both upside and floor for just the offensive environment.
Yep. Real quick on Seattle, kind of same question. Everyone's on board with JSN, but after that, do you think the AJ Barner stuff is real, or is that a little flash in the pan?
I don't think the snaps were great, so it's hard to buy it. Cup is probably good though at those prices.
Yeah. Cup was one that was popping up in the I ended up playing a Sam Darnold double stack that I pulled from Run the Sims last week, and it had the Cup and JSN. Obviously not Barner, but the Sims were kind of all over Darnold being undervalued last week as well.
Yeah, I mean Cup has no touchdowns right now, so there's a little bit in his favor there. He's not playing poorly either.
Yeah, 9 targets last week, but like you said, just no touchdown. So I mean, he's
been a touchdown machine before, bigger body.
Yeah, yep. I like that thought there, and always interesting when both you and JM kind of aligned on on that game. Let's talk a little chalk this week. Obviously going to be a lot of chalk at the running back position, Puka, but from a game perspective, Dallas is probably going to be where people gravitate.
Yeah, just the two running backs. Not necessarily all the playmakers, but there's not one clear game that stands out as the chalk game. So relatively, just because these teams are sort of the worst, some of the worst defenses in the league, I could see go to Dallas. But like I said, just because it's not super consolidated, I think it's perfectly fine to just like onslaught this from like the Dallas side at least. Like this Ryan Flournoy guy also, that's a little bit input volatile. Given like the types of routes he runs, we don't really know if that's sort of like it required an injury for him to get on the field to that extent. So if that was just sort of that one game where plays well, we're going to keep him in, or is that like if he's carved himself a role? But he did sort of like make enough of a statement that you sort of have to like at least give him a shot. And he, in like a relatively small sample this year, especially, he's been very efficient, and he wasn't even bad last year.
Yeah.
So that could be a little sneaky. But really, you can like do this Dallas stuff a lot of ways, with or without the running back.
Yep. What is your thoughts on the Puka chalk? Obviously, he's balling out, great matchup, but at this price tag, you are getting into where you basically need him to drop 30 to kind of smash that. What do you think of that chalk?
I mean, you don't really need him to drop 30. A lot of his like receiving line might be like 93 or something. So they're sort of citing his average game as like a 22 or 23, which isn't going to win you anything. So it's hard for me to make a stand on this particular point. I kind of wish he was in the late games, where if it was chalk, it's like your decision making becomes much simpler, because if you don't have a good start, you can't even play him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just getting at, he doesn't need to get 30 for you to have a winning Puka team if there's not many guys hitting 30.
Yeah. That makes sense. Would you say similar with the CMC price tag and just like what his floor has been?
Yeah, similar. I mean, I kind of think Puka is going to get a little more owned because of what I said about the running backs. If a lot of that running back value is going to be 5 to 6K, it's harder to get to CMC, and it actually makes it easier to get to Puka. Like, all you need is to play like 2 of those value running backs and the cheap quarterback, and you can take any receiver you want. And then the difference between Puka and the next guy in projection is just so much that that guy is going to tend to be the guy you sort of fill in is just going to be Puka on a lot of teams.
Yeah.
So whatever ownership is being projected, it's probably further than what ends up happening.
Yeah.
Or it's probably closer than what ends up happening.
Yeah, I'm seeing right now, CMC at 27.5. And then when we look at Puka here, looking at Run the Sims, we're looking at 29%. So I do envision those guys to be
right, and that's with a
popular.
What was the Puka projection there from Run the Sims?
The ownership on him was
that's an outrageous projection.
Yeah,
29.4.
Yeah, there you
that's
go.
Like that's like 9 and 120.
Yes, which, to be fair, I mean, he's basically been doing, but I guess he was just short of the bonus, I think 2 of the weeks as well. So I guess getting to that 100 tips that. What about some contrarian stuff? You mentioned liking Seattle, Jacksonville. I think that'll still be relatively contrarian, but is there any really off the board stuff?
We didn't really talk about the ugly good game, which was Patriots Saints. May is really cheap. like that's looks like a chalk or like a cash game type price.
Yeah.
It would contrarian side would probably just be Rattler because he's like he's playing decent, which is actually saying a lot for Rattler, given the larger sample of terrible. So it's actually been like several games of decent, and you know they beat the Giants, who just destroyed the Eagles. So maybe Rattler is better than we thought. He played Buffalo okay. So from my perspective, Olave is a bit of a gimme here. Like he probably might even be a little chalk, but you can get to like the other guys. I think Jennings is questionable, but like Shaheed popped off a little bit, and then I think Kamara, if he were to sit, would be a good thing for the offense right now.
Yeah.
And actually his presence was already propping up Olave a little bit because he was just so dead to get open on the stuff he would get open with previously that sort of just by failure, those targets went to the other guys.
What are your thoughts? Because there's always a little enthusiasm when you get Kamara banged up. Juwan Johnson's been hampered. Taysom Hill, is he in play?
I can't. The Sims are breaking with that. I'm sure. I would have to look at snaps. Because if he gets even like 20 to 40%, yeah, actually I could see it, right? He only has the tight end eligibility, which actually could be a good thing. But yeah, you could definitely see it. It would even hurt Rattler.
True, because he's taken the goal line tutties.
It would be a max one for sure.
Yeah.
Those two.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Rattler, it would be just like probably a Rattler, Olave, Shaheed kind of stack.
Could be Juwan. Yeah. I mean, I guess Taysom really becomes a true play if it's Juwan and Kamara out. I don't know about the Johnson status. But I'm happy to throw in Kendre Miller along with the Rattler because they just score so little that you can't even draw sort of like a big enough sample of what it looks like when they score a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And Kendre Miller, he's actually been playing well. I don't know how willing they are to play him, but they might not have a choice now. He even has passing game chops, so it's even onslaughtable, and they're all not really owned outside of Olave.
Yeah.
And then with May, it's because he's going to be owned. Diggs probably gets owned. You might have to get a little more creative, which is sort of why I prefer the Saints side, even though the prospects of success would probably be higher with Patriots. You could get a little creative doing Henderson, since
before you see
his role is like it's volatile, but the pricing is fine, and because he definitely can catch passes, stacking with May is probably pretty correlated.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of enthusiasm for Diggs after that game. I mean, you mentioned the Mac Jones, Kendrick Bourne thing. I felt like the Diggs thing felt a lot like the revenge game. The snaps still weren't, super high up there. What is your read on Diggs? Is he back?
That had to be a revenge game. I mean, it's not, without a doubt.
Yeah. Yeah, he's like, I think I referenced.
He's an emotional guy. The revenge stuff is always more so with those guys because they're thinking about it all week. And then you saw the clips of him like leading the guys in borderline prayer and like being the best leader for a single game you've ever seen.
Yep. Let's the other kind of spot we were going to talk about a little bit is some of these contrarian running backs against chalk defenses. What angles are you liking here?
Oh yeah, from the contrarian side, that's like you can kind of sort of have that as like a category every week. What defense is chalk? Because the opposing running back, especially if it's like a touchdown dependent guy, not necessarily the pass catcher. That's not going to be that correlated to the opposing defense. But if you can sort of just get like the dead zone running back against chalk defense, and then the price isn't, and you can stay like somewhat price sensitive, those are almost always good. So you could probably get to sort of whatever defense you want because of like the values open. So I'm guessing the chalk is going to be, I mean, it's definitely going to be Packers at 3.7 with the Cincy total, and probably Vegas. Yeah, probably Vegas. So both of them actually have, I think I probably brought this up to you because both of them have that running back that I'm talking about. To a lesser extent, Chase Brown, because historically he catches balls. But in this version of the Bengals offense, he's probably not that guy because it's not Burrow checking down, and they're not willing to let Browning like make the calls like they would with Burrow. So actually Chase Brown in profile becomes more of like that traditional running back. So Chase Brown, Pollard, they're both kind of cheap. Super anti-correlated to these chalk defenses. They're fairly touchdown dependent. It's just no one's going to take them.
Would you flip it, or, you know, if people are going to say gravitate to the Packers defense and Josh Jacobs, would you ever think through game scripts of like Chase Brown with Jordan Love stacks and saying they actually get pushed and it's closer here?
No, just because if the game is close, it's not really. You said Chase Brown with Jordan Love. If the game's close, like the Packers almost have to be failing to some extent. So if it was like Jordan Love, I'd much rather take a shootout script than.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not saying it can't get there, but that almost sounds more like a Love is going crazy. And then it's just a bunch of checkdowns to Chase Brown rather than the thesis of basically can Cincy even score, and the Packers defense is going to be chalk. Yeah.
Chase Brown clearly leading that backfield. That one does feel like a clean kind of setup if you get that game script.
They just need to have like some level of success, and then when they're in the red zone, he's the one who punches it in because he's so cheap that drive, the script of that drive of like him getting like 10 points, it's taking 2 or 3 points from like 15% of the field in addition to what you're gaining with like the cheap value that isn't owned.
Yep. Chat talking a little bit about Flacco. Is there any input volatility there? Do we kind of just know who Flacco is? Like, what's your read on him with this offense?
I mean, I actually don't know.
Yeah. I did see
the volatility would just be if the coaching treats him like every other stop and just allow him to throw as much as possible. That, I guess, that is good for Chase Brown, most likely. But I couldn't tell you, and it's really a tough situation to put him in. Yeah, and I just saw Jamar Chase was not practicing. He has an illness, so that's another kind of dock if he can't go. Yeah, it's looking rough. Like people are going to be very confident for the Packers, as they should be.
On the Pollard stuff, I know it's not like a high conviction play, but any concern about Spears continuing to force the issue with a timeshare?
To an extent, if it were to get out of hand, I suppose, or if the Raiders were to get out to a bigger lead. In which case the defense is getting there, the Raiders defense, that is. So once again, it's already in that circumstance where it's more Spears. It's likely that it's already not working out for Pollard, so it kind of matters less. In fact, you could just take Pollard, Titans D or something, since you can get that extra degree of the correlation with Pollard, anti-correlation with Raiders. They're cheap anyway. Titans D isn't going to be like contrarian, but it is going to be correlated to Pollard, which is contrarian.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what Genty will get played a little bit, but outside of that, I don't think anyone wants anything to do with that game.
Right. Genty will get played because Raiders will get played, and then Genty in a vacuum would also get played.
Yeah. Yeah, I like those. I like the Pollard and Brown angles there a bit. We can look at a few lineups here. I think there's something going on with the back end right now. The Sims aren't fully firing right now, so I can look at the classic Opto here to pick off some lineups, and right away you do see multiple Rattler and Trevor Lawrence teams. So the value definitely checking out with some of the stuff you like.
Mm-hmm. Is something up here with Tez Johnson?
Yeah, Tez Johnson in that first lineup. I mean, he has looked pretty spry when I see him with the ball. Interesting. Again, this isn't going to be simmed, right? This is just jamming in.
Yeah, I think we're working out something on the back end at this moment. So
yeah, I assume with Godwin out that some values are popping here on the on the Bucks. Yeah,
it's probably that.
Although that's a tough sell to play both Tez Johnson and Ryan Flournoy in the same lineup.
It's actually kind of going into what I said, which is no one's going to have all the expensive guys on the same team, and that one had Taylor and CMC.
Yep. Yeah, Taylor and CMC and Puka on this one.
Right.
So that's always a funny one, right? Because you get that dynamic where if you just optimize for the highest scoring lineup, but like the cash game bros will not play Tez and Flournoy together.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and see on Tez because I don't even know what the role is. If he were to get elevated, if he's actually getting that level of route participation.
Yeah. And it is interesting, obviously, with the Rattler, Jawan Johnson is the one showing up here a good bit, which is kind of interesting over Olave, but it makes sense that some of these other wide receivers are popping as values.
Yeah, I mean, it's also sorting by total projection here, so there's no diversification.
Right.
So
for sure. Yeah.
It's hard to say. It's hard to really draw conclusions from the ones I'm seeing because they're just going to be similar to the last.
I think the interesting one is just, I think there are some unconventional, I don't know, I guess I would call them non-cash game picks. Like, I don't think Marvin Harrison is going to show up in cash game lineups, but you see him kind of populating in optimals here, which is interesting.
No, I mean, it might be worthwhile for you here to just filter by QB or something.
Mm-hmm. Let's see here. Yeah, and it's a little different. I don't know how much we can glean without the Sims there. That's kind of the interesting part, as opposed to just looking at the top projected lineups. We can basically just get a feel for who the run the Sims projections are higher on than maybe consensus, because otherwise we're seeing a lot of the usual suspects, Rico, CMC. But yeah, Marvin was the one that kind of jumped out to me. Otherwise, about what you'd expect here.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of 3 running back builds as well, which makes sense with how strong the running back plays are on this slate.
Yeah, you sort of have to go that route if you're optimizing for projection. I would like to sort of get a good idea though how much like wide receiver and flex there will be. It could be a bit of an opportunity just because of how many strong running back plays there are.
Yeah, just if the field's overplaying 3 running backs in the flex.
Yeah, because by default, it's going to happen a lot.
Yeah.
If you like value projection to any extent without really treating standard deviations the same, because all the receivers are still going to be more live basically to get 30 or something than the 6K running backs.
Yep.
Even in the elevated roles.
Well, if you guys want to mess around with this, and I'm sure in the Discord they'll let you guys know when the sim stuff is ready to rock for week 6. You can head over to runthesims.com. You can get 10% off, promo code Pete. Like I said yesterday on Lulz, we did kind of a full deeper dive on Shady Advice's portfolio diversity tool. Really cool conversation there, and also just reorienting how you think about diversity. You know, sometimes people thinking it means that one player wouldn't necessarily show up in a bunch of lineups, but we were kind of talking that through, how that's not necessarily what diversity means in a portfolio standpoint. So highly recommend checking that out. Appreciate everybody hanging out in the chat. We got some people hyping up Tez, had a carry with Bucky last week, played 22 snaps last week, 36% with Godwin available. So yeah, I see the enthusiasm for Tez Johnson there. Any final words for you, Youda, on this week 6 edition of Bully the Sims?
Nope. Just good luck, everyone.
Beautiful. I am going to hop over right now to do the underdog version of the week 6 slate preview. That's often on the clock with the Badge Bros. If you're watching here, you should be automatically redirected. If not, just head to my YouTube page, and we will be live here in just a couple of minutes. So for JM, for Youda, for everybody hanging out in the chat, good luck in week 6, and go hang out with us and talk some underdog here in a second. Peace.